Um, I'm doing long form. I thought to do shorts, but I won't. If I ever get the ability to do live, I will do that because I like a little bit of stream of thought. I think I can get to my point well enough. I was talking to a friend about the trolley problem in the context of AI. Now, the trolley problem, really quickly, is you have two rails. You have access to a switch to change which rail it goes between. The rail it is currently on is aiming at 5 people. If you switch it, it aims at only one. Do you switch the rail? The reason it's a problem is because once you put yourself into the system, you could be responsible for death. Are you responsible for the death if you do nothing? It's an interesting social exercise to see how people think. Some people believe that if you don't act, you are responsible, and then some people believe that if you don't act, you aren't responsible. Um, like wars in the Middle East kind of situation. If you don't protest it, then you are complicit, um, which is a complicated issue by itself. So, trolley problem. Um, we have AI that could theoretically think in a utilitarian way. In this conversation with my friend, we were talking about sociopaths or antisocial personality disorder and how they tend to function better with the trolley problem from a utilitarian perspective. They make utilitarian choices easier because they don't have the wiring to worry about whether or not it's the right social decision. It saved the most lives, so no problem. That's probably why they become doctors, because they can make those hard decisions in a moment without thinking about the emotional fallout. Um, so for an AI, I was considering that in the if AI became in charge of making decisions for us, it wouldn't be able to make small community decisions because those ones have to be made individually. The community needs to be able to measure the importance of certain things, even if there's a distinct 5 people die versus 1 person die. Um, choosing who dies just doesn't have the same feeling. But from a large uh, community perspective of millions of people, politicians have to make those decisions every day. Um, you can be critical and say that they don't actually make those decisions well, or they make those decisions poorly, or they make them selfishly. That's a different conversation. But they are confronted with those decisions, and there is no opting out. There is no dilemma of whether or not you touch the switch. Now you're responsible for those deaths, whether or not there's fewer deaths, right? They are at the switch and they are responsible for the switch. So the decision has to just be the most possible benefit, the most utilitarian when you're a politician. Um, having an AI know what is the most utilitarian, the most beneficial to the greater population is nearly impossible to guarantee. You got language models at the beginning of the the generative pre-trained transformer, GPT, um, fad about 3 years ago, 2022. No, actually about 2020. It's been a long time. Um, I was pretty vehement that we are going to be able to program these things to represent a population. The average of a population should be presented from a political perspective. There are rights and wrongs, but a politician's job is to represent their constituency. And if they misrepresent their constituents, then they need to vote better, right? Um, we can say that the average person does. We tend to be moral. I like to give us. I might sound naive. I like to give us a little more credit. We tend to be pretty moral creatures. Even people who have horrible ideas, they're thinking morally. They just have the wrong reason. like people who believe that the trans bathrooms issues by taking away freedoms of people who present as male and tell them that they have to go into a female bathroom. I saw a video earlier. This is why I want to do a live stream instead, because I go off on tangents. I saw a video earlier of a trans man who was dressed in pink but had a beard being chastised and shamed for going into the women's bathroom. And my first reaction was, yeah, like shit, this is a person with a beard who's dressed as a woman. Turns out it was a trans man, meaning someone who was assigned female at birth, just doing what they were told to, going into a woman's bathroom because they were born with female parts. So, like, it's a good example of small populations need to make their own decisions, but big populations need to have a utilitarian perspective. And there's no utility to deciding who uses bathrooms. In my opinion, every bathroom should have enough privacy to be a gender neutral bathroom. If it doesn't have enough privacy to be that, then it's, yeah, not easy to support a population, especially one that has convinced itself that people are going to the bathroom for the sole reason of being predators. So that's my tangent, but that's an example of how populations can think morally, want to protect your children, and that's how they get you, because they know you want to protect your children. All the propaganda will be about you protecting your children. It has been since forever. The Satanic Panic in the 70s, the same thing that made Dungeons and Dragons look like it was a cult. A different offshoot was that, fun fact, it was around the same time that people were putting their children into childcare outside of their communities with people who they didn't know. So naturally, you would get this kind of paranoia because there would be the possibility of predators. And then that paranoia increased because people believed that their children were, their daycares were running satanic rings. And it's always protect your children, because people can, if you want to start a meme, like a conspiracy meme, make it about children, and boom, everyone believes it. Or everyone passes it on because they want to be careful. They don't want to be critical. It's a shoot first, ask questions later situation, which is not healthy. So back to the point, AI can bypass that. It doesn't have the emotions. It's a sociopath. It doesn't get convinced that children are being hurt. It looks at the statistics and says, what will help the most people? And then, like, it can also make suggestions like, how can you protect your children if this is something you're worried about? But it looks at statistics, says, how can I help the most people? What is the best possible situation? When I look at laws being made to protect people, I always see this outcome that's just going to hurt people. I'm doing a lot of tangents because this is how I roll, but you can kind of tell how it all stitches together and why AI might be involved in having an informational ecosystem that can protect itself from emotional biases. There's in Saskatchewan, and I think on the East Coast, they made a rule. I don't know if it was a law or a policy, but basically teachers would get in trouble if they started using a kid's pronouns without asking permission from their parents. They made a law. Forgive me if it's not a law and it's just a bylaw or a policy or something. But it's a procedure where a teacher could get fired if they didn't follow it, where they have to get permission from the parents. So for me, I can see they're trying to protect the kids because they believe that there's a culture that's infesting their brains And to some degree, it's worthy of concern because there is cultures out there infesting brains, and we've never been confronted with TikTok culture, so we can't say if they're right or wrong. To some degree, it is absolutely possible. So the concern is real, but making laws around a fear is terrifying. People doing that is terrifying because that's the actual concern. That is when something becomes real. So teachers are now put in this place where a child who might die of suicide if they don't have a safe place to be. And by safe place, I mean somewhere where someone treats them like they have a voice. Teenagers are, and teenagers die. Like I'm not doing the safe space thing. And like it's teenagers die because they feel alone. They feel isolated. And now there's a law that isolates them more. And if a teacher has a moral decision, back to the trolley problem, of breaking the rules and potentially getting fired, or just saying she instead of he in classroom without forcing anyone else to do it, that's a weird moral decision to pin on someone. Like when I was a kid, everyone had a different name. Like you got these 13-year-olds who say, I want to be called Starfire. And then they don't respond to you unless you call them Starfire. Like that's silly. There's like Spike. I could tell you there was a kid named Spike when I was a teenager, probably 15 years old, so 100 years ago, who was, what is the word? Intersex. Both parts. And had a different name. I don't know what it was. Was born with a different name, but like, call me Spike. Okay, I'll call you Spike. Done. Does that need to be on paper? Do I need to send a permission slip home? Do I need to, and what if I have hostile parents, like parents who believe that this child needs to be baptized every 2 months? Like that's an exaggeration, but it's like you've got the other cult, right? Like it's just two cults fighting against each other. It, I don't mean it's actually two cults, but it's if it was a cult or a an infestation of the mind, then it would be just a cult versus a cult, right? So you treat it like it's just this thing that happens. Please. Less rules is better. And like I'm happy to tell you my political stances, but it's more nuanced than this. Don't take it as like I'm a hardcore liberal. It's way more nuanced. In fact, it'll sound more like I'm a libertarian because the more rules you make, the worse it is. The fewer rules you can make while still directing a population to make the best possible decisions for the individual, that's the best system. Having access to resources makes me a liberal, but having less rules, less laws that force you to behave a certain way makes me a libertarian. And I don't like conservative seems to be neither of those nowadays. It's more laws and more conservative rules about how you behave. Like same people who complain about burqas. What's the difference? You want to protect your culture. I think that's fair. But when you want to force your culture, that's different. If any law exists, it should be to protect a culture, to say this culture needs to be treated as legitimate and reasonable as long as it doesn't hurt anyone. So, anyway, trolley problem. The laws that you can make and who it hurts and who it doesn't hurt. How do you weigh what choices a politician makes so that it helps the most people? Our politicians, I don't generally trust them. I currently like our prime minister. Ironically, he's old school conservative. He's not a liberal. He is making policies that protect the environment, but don't force us to pay more. Which I'd rather tax the billionaires, but I understand, right? Trolley problem. Next video, I'll talk a little bit about, I think it was Pizarro. Dave Pizarro did there's a really cool podcast, Very Bad Wizards. Dave Pizarro did a fun trolley problem. No, I'll talk about it now, I guess. No, I'll talk about it the next time, but I'll talk about it now as well. Where you had Tyrone Jenkins, probably not Jenkins, but Tyrone something. It's a black sounding name. And you had Chip Ellsworth III, a white sounding name. And Tyrone is standing on the bridge. He's a big guy, real chubby. And if you push, he's just teetering. And if you push him off the bridge, so it's got the regular trolley problem where you can save multiple lives by pulling a lever, but then it escalates to the point where you're pushing a fat man off a bridge. Now, Tyrone is teetering, and you have the London Philharmonic Orchestra. If you push him, he'll land in front of the trolley, stop the trolley, save the London Philharmonic Orchestra. Or you have Chip Ellsworth III. Push him, he'll fall in front of the trolley and save the Harlem Jazz Orchestra. He'll save them. And then people are confronted with this problem. And it's meant to see how people react to a black sounding name or a white sounding name with the trolley problem, and if there is a racial bias for some people. And I think it was interesting because it ended up biasing towards liberals being more interested in killing white people, and conservatives being more neutral and not actually selecting a race, which was funny because liberals are like, yeah, fuck him. He's white. He doesn't deserve to live. I want to save the Harlem Jazz Orchestra. Their culture is more valuable. Whereas the Philharmonic Orchestra you're not going to get the same kind of background thought from liberal thinkers about saving culture versus killing. And there probably is a little confounding factor about the fact that everyone knows the London Philharmonic, but people don't realize that the Harlem has a jazz orchestra, so they might be like, yeah, it's important to save culture, whether or not it's colored. I mean, has colored with being people of color. Anyway, I'll talk more about that.